So every morning, the construction crew for Chernobyl, Arkady's name, begged Nadia to come out with them and supervise. They had been exiled far to the east of the settlement, so that it made sense to go out for a full day with them. But then the medical team wanted her help building a clinic and some labs inside. From the disc, oh my god, I can't. Why can I still hear the music? Okay, I paused it. That was freaky. Stonk de Parma. The smell of Ohio. Okay, I literally could watch like a 10-hour just ads of Cowboys stream. Anyways. Chernobyl, they'd been exiled to the far east of the settlement so that it made sense to go out for a full day with them. But then the medical team wanted her help building a clinic and some labs inside from the discarded freight crates that they were converting into shelters. So instead of staying out at Chernobyl, she would go back midday to eat and help the med team. Every night she passed out exhausted. Some evenings before she did, she had long talks with Arkady up on Phobos. His crew was having trouble with the moon's microgravity, and he wanted her advice as well. If only we could just get into some G to live, to sleep. If only we could get into some G just to live, to sleep, Arkady said. Build train tracks in a ring around the surface, Nadia suggested out of a doze. Make one of the tanks from the Ares into a train and run it around the track. Get on board and run the train around fast enough to give you some G against the ceiling of the train. Static, and then Arkady's wild cackle. Nadezhda Francine, I love you. I love you. You love gravity. With all this advisory work, the construction of their permanent habitat went slowly indeed. Yeah, now there's a Martian moon party train. With all this advisory work, the construction of their permanent habitat went slowly indeed. It was only once a week or so that Nadia would climb into the open cab of a Mercedes, and rumble over the torn ground to the end of the trench she had started. At this point, it was 10 meters wide, 50 long, and 4 deep, which was as deep as she wanted to go. The bottom of the trench was the same as the surface. Clay, fines, rocks of all sizes, regolith. While she worked with the bulldozer, the geologist hopped in and out of the hole, taking samples and looking around. Even Anne, who did not like the way they were ripping up the area. But no geologist born could ever keep away from a land cut. I don't know. You guys are very distracting. I'm putting it on emo only mode. Thank you. You're just listening anyways, right? But no geologist ever born could keep away from a land cut. Nadia listened to their conversation band as she worked. They figured the regolith was probably much the same all the way down to bedrock, which was too bad. Regolith was not Nadia's idea of good ground. At least its water content was low, less than 0.1%, which meant that they wouldn't get much slumping under a foundation, one of the constant nightmares of Siberian construction. When she got the regolith cut right, she was going to lay a foundation of Portland cement, the best concrete they could make with the materials at hand. It would crack unless they poured it 2 meters thick, but shikata ganai. And the thickness would provide some insulation. But she would have to box the mud and heat it to get it to cure. It wouldn't below 13 degrees centigrade. So that meant heating elements. Slow, slow. Everything was slow. She drove the dozer forward to lengthen the trench, and it bit the ground and bucked. Then the weight of the thing told, and the scoop cut through the regolith and plowed forward. "What a pig," Nadia said to the vehicle fondly. "Nadia's in love with a bulldozer," Maya said over their band. "At least I know who I'm in love with," Nadia mouthed. Silently. She didn't say that out loud. "At least I know who I'm in love with," Nadia mouthed. Or did she say it out loud? Does mouthed mean like mimed it or like mouthed off? I don't know. She had spent too many of the evenings of the last week out in the tool shed with Maya. Listening to her rattle away about her problems with John, about how she really got along in most ways better with Frank, about how she couldn't decide what she felt, and was sure Frank hated her now, etc., etc., etc. Cleaning tools, Nadia had said da, 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 trying to hide her lack of interest. The truth was she was tired of Maya's problems and would rather have discussed building materials or almost anything else. A call from the Chernobyl crew interrupted her bulldozing. "Nadia, how can we get cement this thick to set in the cold?" "Heat it." "We are." "Heat it more." "Oh." They were almost done out there, Nadia judged. The rickover had been mostly pre-assembled. It was a matter of putting the forms together, fitting in the steel containment tank, filling the pipes with water, which dropped their supply to nearly nothing, wiring it all up, piling sandbags around it all, and pulling the control rods. After that, they would have 300 kilowatts on hand, which would put an end to the nightly argument over who got the lion's share of generator power the next day. There was a call from Sachs. One of the Sabatier processors had clogged, and they couldn't get the housing off of it. So Nadia left the bulldozing to John and Maya, and took a rover to the factory complex to have a look. "I'm off to see the alchemists," she said. Have you ever noticed how much the machinery here reflects the character of the industry that built it? Sachs remarked to Nadia as she arrived and went to work on the Sabatier. If it's built by car companies, it's low-powered but reliable. If it's built by the aerospace industry, it's outrageously high-powered but breaks down twice a day. And partnership products are horribly designed, Nadia said. Right. And chemical equipment is finicky, Spencer Jackson added. I'll say, especially in this dust. The Boeing air miners had only the start of the factory. The Boeing air miners had only been the start of the factory complex. Their gases were fed into big boxy trailers to be compressed and expanded and rendered and recombined using chemical engineering operations such as dehumidification, liquefaction, fractional distillation, electrolysis, electrosynthesis, the Sabatier process. I don't know. I gotta look it up now. Apparently it's a whole thing. Knives. Why am I caps lock? Sabatier. Oh. Sabatier. That's not what I thought it would be at all. Okay, Sabatier. The Sabatier process, the Röskig process, the Oswald process. Slowly they worked up more and more complex chemicals, which flowed from one factory to the next through a warren of structures that looked like mobile homes caught in a web of color-coded tanks and pipes and tubes and cables. Spencer's current favorite product was magnesium, which was plentiful. They were getting 25 kilos of it from every cubic meter of regolith, he said. And it was so light in Martian G that a big bar of it felt like a piece of plastic. It's too brittle when pure, Spencer said. But if we alloy it just a bit, we'll have an extremely light and strong metal. Martian steel, Nadia said. Better than that. So, alchemy. But with finicky machines. Nadia found the Sabatier's problem, and went to work fixing a broken vacuum pump. It was amazing how much of the factory complex came down to pumps. Sometimes it seemed nothing but a mad assemblage of them, and by their nature, they kept clogging with fines and breaking down. Two hours later, the Sabatier was fixed. On the way back to the trailer park, Nadia glanced into the first greenhouse. Plants were already blooming, the new crops breaking out of their beds of new black soil. Green glowed intensely in the reds of this world. It was a pleasure to see it. The bamboo was growing several centimeters a day, she had been told, and the crop was already nearly 5 meters tall. It was easy to see they were going to need more soil. Back at the alchemists, they were using nitrogen from the Boeings to synthesize ammonia fertilizers. Hiroko craved these because the regolith was an agricultural nightmare, intensely salty, explosive with peroxides, extremely arid, and completely without biomass. They were going to have to construct soil, just like they had the magnesium bars. Nadia went into her habitat in the trailer park for a standing lunch. Then she was out again, to the site of the permanent habitat. Am I reading too fast? My neighbors are so loud. Great, good. I feel like mostly I read too slow. But it's hard to read fast, you know? Sweet, thank you. My neighbors got really quiet. I hope they can't hear me. It's fine. I actually enjoy the noise. Sometimes they're listening to Pat the Bunny. I've never talked to them. But I want to be their friends, kind of. I don't know. I don't know if I want to be friends with my neighbors, but I want to be friends with those neighbors. I think they're listening to Pat the Bunny right now. Like, I love that for them. Okay, brick makers, no. Sabatier. Soil. Right, okay. Nadia went into her habitat in the trailer park for a standing lunch, and then she was out again to the site of the permanent habitat. The floor of the trench had been almost leveled in her absence. She stood on the edge of the hole, looking down in it. They were going to build a design that she liked tremendously. One she had worked on herself in Antarctica and on the Aries. A simple line of barrel-vaulted chambers sharing adjacent walls. By setting them in the trench, the chambers would be half buried to begin with. Then, when completed, they would be covered by 10 meters of sandbagged regolith to stop radiation. And also because they planned to pressurize to 450 millibars to keep the buildings from exploding. Local materials were all they needed for the exteriors of these buildings. Portland, cement, and bricks were it, basically. With plastic liner in some places to ensure the seal. Unfortunately, the brick makers were having some trouble, and they gave Nadia a call. Nadia's patience was running short, and she groaned. "We travel all the way to Mars, and you can't make bricks?" "It's not that we can't make bricks," said Jean. "It's just that I don't like them." The brick-making factory mixed clays and sulfur extracted from the regolith, and this preparation was poured into brick molds and baked until the sulfur began to polymerize. And then, as the bricks cooled, they were compressed a bit in another part of the machine. The resulting blackish-red bricks had a tensile strength that was technically adequate for use in the barrel vaults. But Jean wasn't happy. "We don't need to be at minimum values for heavy roofs over our heads," he said. "What if we pile one sandbag too many on top of it, or if we get a little Marsquake? I don't like it." After some thought, Nadia said, "Add nylon." "What?" "Go out and find the parachutes from the freight drops and shred them real fine and add them to the clay. That'll help the tensile strength. Very true, Jean said after a pause. Good idea. Think we can find the parachutes? They must be east of here somewhere. So they had finally found a job for the geologists that actually helped the construction effort. Anne and Simon and Phyllis and Sasha and Igor drove long-distance rovers over the horizon to the east of the base, searching and surveying far past Chernobyl. And in the next week, they found almost 40 parachutes, each one representing a few hundred kilos of useful nylon. One day they came back excited, having reached Ganges Katina, a series of sinkholes. Ganges Katina, a series of sinkholes in the plain 100 kilometers to the southeast. It was strange, Igor said, because you can't see them until the last minute. And then they're like huge funnels, about 10 kilometers across and a couple deep, 8 or 9 in a row, each smaller and shallower. Fantastic. They're probably thermokarsts, but they're so big it's hard to believe it. Sasha said, "It's nice to see such a distance after all this near horizon stuff." They're thermokarsts, Anne said, but they had drilled and found no water. This was getting to be a concern. They hadn't found any water to speak of in the ground, no matter how far down they drilled. It forced them to rely on the supplies from the air miners. Nadia shrugged. The air miners were pretty tough. She wanted to think about her vaults. The new improved bricks were appearing, and she had started the robots building the walls and roofs. The brick factory filled little robot cars, which rolled like toy rovers across the plain to cranes at the site. The cranes pulled the bricks out one by one and placed them on cold mortar spread by another set of robots. The system worked so well that soon the bottleneck became brick production itself. Nadia would have been pleased if she had more faith in the robots. These seemed okay, but her experiences with robots in the years on Novi Mir had made her wary. They were great if everything went perfectly. But nothing ever went perfectly. And it was hard to program them with decision algorithms that didn't either make them so cautious that they froze every few minutes, or so uncontrolled that they could commit unbelievable acts of stupidity, repeating an error 1,000 times and magnifying a glitch into a giant blunder. As in Maya's emotional life. Wow, Nadia. I wasn't expecting that line about Maya there. Just obliterated. As in Maya's emotional life. You got what you put into robots. But even the best were mindless idiots. Alright, I gotta pee. And we'll decide if we read further. I think we're actually about to catch up to where I stopped reading. I started reading this book and I read this much in like 3 days. Not to brag, but I enjoyed it. But we're almost caught up to where I don't know what happens next.